In this video, I'm going to show you how you can do the T-connector. This is in Chapter 7. This is Project 7.1, where we're learning how to do isometric drawings. So I've pulled up what you see in your book, which is a picture of the isometric. As you can see, the T-connector is shaped like a T, so we're actually going to start off with that T shape. We have a lot of dimensions here. We'll just slowly build this thing using isometric drawing, and we will slowly build this up. So things to remember as we're doing isometrics. When we put ourselves into the isometric mode, it is important that we leave our ortho on. Ortho is F8 on your keyboard, so that we can be sure that we're drawing at 30-degree and 90-degree angles. We will use the ellipse command, but instead of just the ellipse, we're going to use the iso circle option. So we'll have to remember to set it to an iso circle in the ellipse command. And certain commands do not work. So with isometric, sadly, fillet does not work the way that it should, offset does not work the way that it should, and chamfer does not work the way that it should. So those are three commands we're not able to use in isometric, so we'll work around that and I'll show you how to do it. So getting started, we're going to open up the Imperial prototype file. I've already got that one open. We're going to save it into our home directory as the T connector. So I'll come right over here to the drawing file and I'm going to say save as. We will call it I'll put it on my desktop and we will call it the T connector. All right. So draw the T connector within the magenta rectangle. We'll come back here and look at what our other steps are. Activate the model tab. We were in the model tab. The model tab is where that black space is, our drawing space, the graphics window. We're going to set the units to decimal. And then we're going to set AutoCAD's snap type to isometric snap. There is a picture of an icon for that. We're going to turn on our ortho. Here's a picture of the ortho. That's an F8. And we're going to get started creating the isometric. So I'll keep flipping back and forth to this book so you can see the steps that we need to do. So we're going to go in at first and go ahead and set the units to decimal, turn on our isometric snap, turn on our ortho, and then we'll get started. I'm going to draw that T shape. The overall shape has a length of 5 horizontally, and vertically it has a length of 3. So I'll come back into AutoCAD and we will get started. When you're doing isometrics, I like to turn that grid off because the minute we put ourselves into an isometric view, that grid is going to get a little wonky. So I'll leave it on just to show you what happens. To put ourselves in the isometric view, the easiest way to do this, and this showed up probably three releases ago or so, we have an option down here to put ourselves into an isometric view. When we put ourselves into an isometric view, it's important to note, look at my crosshair right now. So when I draw a line and I turn on my ortho, so I'm going to hit F8, or you could hit this button right here. But when I turn on my ortho, remember we've used this before, and it locks you into horizontal and vertical lines. You can't even make an angled line if you tried, unless you typed in a specific angle. But just using direct entry, I cannot get an angled line. So it's easy to think of ortho as locking you into just horizontal and just vertical lines. But actually what the ortho is doing is it's locking you into what your crosshair looks like. So in doing this, we're going to change our crosshair to be an isometric. And right now it really doesn't it doesn't matter which one of these you choose. We're just going to click one. Now, look, there's where I was saying my grid was going to kind of get crazy over here. It went at an angle, so I'm just going to turn that grid off. It's kind of not very useful when you're in isometric mode. But now that I've got my crosshair looking this way and I draw a line, I'm locked into these two angles that I see. I cannot make a vertical line even if I tried. If I hit F5, that toggles between the different isometric cursors that I have. I cannot make a line, going up at that 150 degrees. If I hit F5 one more time, now I can go vertically in this way, but I can't make a line over here at 30 degrees. So that F5 you can use in the middle of a command. You can always hit F5 and just toggle between the different isometric views that you can have. There are 3 different ones. So you've got it this way, and this way. So maybe easier to see it there. So F5, F5, and F5. And you can just keep toggling between those three. So now that we know about this, we're going to go ahead and start our drawing. So I'm going to draw a line. I'm going to click just somewhere in the middle. We don't have a specific start point for this one, but we'll click somewhere in the middle. And we're going to draw it out a distance of 5. We're going to draw another line, taking it from the midpoint, and we need to bring it straight down. So I'm going to hit F5 again. I'm going to pull my line down, and it tells me my distance is 3. So press enter. I've got the T for my T connector. All right, let's go back in here and see we've got this drawn. Scroll down, and now we need to do our ISO circles. And so those ISO circles, they're a little bit tricky. You have to remember how to draw them. And it's going to ask you, potentially could ask you for a radius. It probably is going to ask us for a radius. We're going to have to tell it needs to be a diameter. So we need to make sure we have one of them that it's a 1-inch diameter. The second one has a 2-inch diameter. They're concentric, which means they share the same center point. So we're going to do them at the endpoints of all of those lines, those 3 lines of the T. So the 3 endpoints that we have, 1-inch diameter, 2-inch diameter. Let's come back to the drawing. We're going to do our ellipse command, and actually for that ellipse, we're going to pull this down. Instead of doing the center option, we're going to choose the axis end option. It won't work with the center option. But if you look down here at the command line, we now have an option for ISO circle. So you can type in I for ISO circle. You can move down here and click on the word ISO circle. You can do your down arrow and keep toggling till you see ISO circle and press enter. Typically, I just do the I, enter. It's the easiest way to do it, I think. So we're going to do an ISO circle. And you'll know that you did it correctly when you click here to start, and it kind of functions like the circle command instead of the arc command or ellipse command. So we're going to do that ISO circle, and watch, I just want to show you when I press F5 right now, that will toggle between ISO top, ISO right, and ISO left. So you're going to figure out which one looks the best. It's ISO right that we're going for. So now I've got this. But this is where, look down at the command line, it's telling me to give it a radius of the ISO circle. But if you remember, we were not given the radius, we were given the diameter. So it's important to remember right here, we're going to have to press D for diameter, press enter, and now it's prompting me for the diameter. So the first one, I'm going to type in a diameter of 1. Press enter after you typed in your diameter. I'm going to start that command again. I need to tell it to be an ISO circle, so I for ISO circle, enter. I'm going to click on that same endpoint. It's asking me for a radius again, so I need to force it to be a diameter. D, enter. And this one's going to have a diameter of 2. If you accidentally just typed 1 and 2 without forcing it to ask you for a diameter, you have just made your circles 2 times too big. So look at your drawing and make sure that you don't have giant circles. Yours should look like mine. Now what we're going to do is we could continue and just draw 2 ISO circles here, 2 ISO circles here, but since they're all the same size, let's just go ahead and do the copy command. It's always better to use the tools that we've got. Copy command, I'll copy it from the endpoint to this endpoint to this endpoint. The endpoint that I originally picked it up at is also the center of those 2 circles. So when you do it, the center should already be at the endpoint. So it really doesn't matter which base point you're picking it up at. It could be the center of the circles or it could be the endpoint of the line. Either way, it's the same place, but you're going to snap to endpoint and endpoint to get your lines looking the way that you need them. All right, so we've done step 4. We're going to come down here to step number 5. We're going to actually draw these lines out to figure out how to get this done. So I'm going to come over here. Normally this would be a great time to use the offset command, but offset won't work for us. So the way that I do this is I do the copy command. So you can copy and just pull it in the direction that you want to go, and you can type in your distance. So copy, select this, press enter. Select the base point, and I'm going to pull it, make sure your ortho is on. You have to have your ortho on when you're doing isometrics. But I'm going to pull it up, If our biggest diameter was a diameter of 2, that means it has a radius of 1. So to get from the center to the very top is going to be a distance of 1. So I'm going to pull it up. I like to kind of over-exaggerate how far I pull it up. That way it doesn't actually get overridden by O-snap. Sometimes that happens and it'll snap back to something that I didn't want. So I always exaggerate how far I pull it up just to make sure no O-snaps are going to catch me here. I'm going to pull it up and I'm going to type in a distance of 1. I'm going to pull it down, and again, over-exaggerating. I don't want any of these O-snaps to get me, so I'm going to pull it down, over-exaggerate how far you're going to do it, and type in your distance of 1. You're not clicking anywhere. I'm just typing my distance. Press Enter. All right, so press Enter one more time to end that command, and I have just copied this line up and down so it's tangent to those points. I'm going to do one more copy command. I'm going to take this line, select it, press Enter, select a base point, and again I'm going to exaggerate how far I go out. A distance of 1, exaggerate a distance of 1, press Enter to end the command, and now I have that T in the middle was just a guide to get me to the center of those circles. It was a guide to help me get the copies to get the edges, so I'm going to erase that T. I'm going to use my extend command. So extend is kind of buried in with that trim. Extend. I'm going to press Enter so it extends to the next thing that it sees, and I'll just click here. Click here, it just extends right up. Now I've got this shape. Now what I need to do, this is the tricky part. So I've got this guy right here. The tricky part here is now I've got this angle at the top. But we can't draw angles when we are in isometric, because with isometric, we're already at an angle. So drawing 37 degrees when we're already at 30 degrees, it's going to make it all wonky. So what we're going to have to do is take this distance. We know that this is 2 over. We know that this is 2 up. We know it's 37 degrees down. So you could do some math there and know that this is 180 degrees plus 37 degrees. So that would be 180 would be 190, 200, 210, 217 would be the angle here. Or we can just go up and over, and then we'll just figure out how to draw that line. What we're trying to get is this line, this distance right here, this tiny little guy right here. And so we're going to go back into AutoCAD. I need to do this. I can't do it in isometric, so I'm going to have to put myself back into my regular cursor, which would be rectangular snap. So I'm going to click on that button to turn it off, and now I'm out of isometric mode and I'm back into my rectangular snap. I'm going to draw a line. We'll just do it off to the side over here. We're going to go over a distance of 2, up a distance of 2. We can come down, and if we know what that distance is, we can come down that distance. I'm going to turn off my ortho, press F8. So if I come down this way, I can take my 180 plus my 37 degrees, which would be 217. So I'm going to make sure when I'm doing this, when you draw angles in AutoCAD, it looks at kind of where you're starting from, and it imagines there's a horizon here. So if you want your angle to go up, you're going to go up. If you want your angle to go down, you're going to go down. It's a little bit tricky, but actually, if I'm going to say 217, I'm actually going to keep it up here to make my angle go all the way from 0 down to 217. So I'm going to, any length of line will work. I'm just going to press Tab and type 217. And it just went down 217. If I had started down here, it would have done 217 from 0 and gone back up this way, counterclockwise. Oh, I'm sorry, clockwise. So now that we have this angle, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to draw a line. I have no idea what length that line is. I'm going to trim right there. And so this is how I would have drawn this if I were drawing just the front view of this T connector. What I'm actually going to do now, it's a little bit tricky, but it's cool. Watch. I'm going to copy this to here because I know that's a length of 2. I'm going to copy this whatever length that is, I don't even know, to here. Now I'm just going to draw a line, connect the dots. So from endpoint to endpoint. Do you see how skewed that is? This is what I was talking about. You can't draw an angle when you're in isometric because you're already at an angle. So the whole thing, it's kind of skewed. Now that we have that, we don't need this guy anymore. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to now trim. So using the trim command, it's buried in my extend. So trim, I'm going to press enter. I'm going to trim out all of these lines. Trim the insides of these arcs as well. That looks amazing. Look at that. Looking good, looking good. All right. So I'm done with this guy. The next step, oh, it just showed me, that's step 8, we did that. The next step is, I've got the guy looking like this, trim out any lines, we did. The next step is, I need to get fillets in here, but remember the fillet command does not work when I'm using isometric. So what I'm going to have to do is use the copy command. I'm going to take this line, I'm going to copy it over. We have a radius of 0.38, so that means to get to the center of that arc, I'm going to copy over 0.38 and down and up 0.38. I'm going to copy all of these lines over 0.38, and then I'm going to have to draw iso circles. So I'm going to do the copy command. May as well just pick up these 2 lines while we're at it. Pressed enter when I was done. Oops, you know what I have not done? I have not put myself back into an isometric mode. I'm going to click that button, and I'm also going to click the button to put myself into ortho. Got to make sure you've got ortho on and your isometric on. So now I can do it. Copy, click those 2, press enter. Select a base point. It doesn't matter where your base point is. I'm not even going to be on the line. I'll just touch out in here in space. Remember I talked about exaggerating how far you bring it out just so O-snaps don't get you. I'm going to type in 0.38. Press enter to end that command. I'm going to select these 2 lines. Just saving myself some time so I don't have to do it so many times. But 0.38. I'm going to copy this line here and here. Press enter. Anywhere for a base point, slide it out, 0.38. Cannot stress how important it is that you have your ortho on right now. I know I keep saying it. Come down, 0.38. All right, that looks good. Now we have the centers for where those iso circles are going to go. So I'll come into here. I'm going to do an iso circle. Remember, I enter for iso circle. Let's zoom into one of these. And you can either, if you know you did it right, you can either snap to that endpoint or you can type in 0.38. Oops, 0.38. And I've got my iso circle. Looking good. Now, just because I don't want to have to keep repeating myself, I'm just going to say copy, select the object, press enter, click here. And you got to make sure you're clicking to the intersection where those 2 lines are crossing each other. All right. Now I can go erase these out. Those were just construction lines to get me to the center. Over here. Very good. Now I'm going to do my trim command. Press enter when you do the trim command. Select all of this. All right, looks good. So I've got the whole front surface of this, the front face of my T-connector with the fillets, with the angle, with the iso circles. Let's come back over here and look. We did all of that. We did this. Now what we're going to do is we're going to copy this back. So it has a depth of 1. So we're going to copy all of the important lines back. You don't have to copy the entire thing because you're going to end up erasing and trimming a whole lot. So we'll just kind of go with the picture that it shows here just to give us which lines we're going to copy back. So you're welcome to just look in the book and see what this looks like. I'm going to use my copy command. I definitely need this. I definitely need that. I'm going to need this. I am going to need this guy and this guy, right here and right here. And I think that's it. Yeah, make sure that you get, there is that little arc right here. There's like a little guy right there. You got to make sure you get him. So I'll press enter. I'm going to do the copy command, but I need to go back like up and to the left. So I'm going to hit F5 to allow me to go that direction. And I'm going to just type in a distance. So my distance is 1. Press enter after you press 1, and then press enter again to end that command. Now what I'm going to do is just close it off, connect all the dots. So a line from endpoint to endpoint, endpoint to endpoint. We actually need to turn on our quadrant OSnap, quadrant to quadrant. Oops, quadrant to quadrant, quadrant to quadrant. Now all I got to do is come in here and just trim this thing up. So trim, press enter. I don't need this line. I don't need this line. I don't need this line. I don't need this line, and I don't need this line. Notice how there's a little piece hanging right here. I don't need this line either. If you are using an older version of AutoCAD, you'll have to stop and erase this line. If you are using AutoCAD 2021, this is like the coolest thing that came out with AutoCAD 2021. Now it will let me, in the middle of the trim command, just erase that line. So that is, honestly, it's my favorite feature that came out with 2021. So I'll click here, click here, click here, click there, click there, press enter when I'm done, and that is my key connector. It looks great. So what you need to do after this is we'll come over here, click on multi-view. You're going to fill out the title block. If you look in, I'm going to double click into my viewport. Look and see, my scale is 1 to 2. So when you're filling out the scale, you need to say 1 to 2. Another thing to take note of is the font. It is not a very nice looking font. So what you're going to need to do is come over here to several ways that you can get to it. You can pull down annotation and get to your text style here. What we're going to do is change it to Arial. If you just start typing ARI, it just jumps right to it. So we're going to apply and close. And now that font looks a lot better. So on all of our projects, anything mechanical, you're going to make sure that you've set your drawing to the Arial font. The only other font that we use in this class is the Stylus BT font for the architectural projects. So when in doubt, if it's architectural, it's Stylus BT. If it is mechanical, you're going to use Arial, and it needs to be updated. So you see a big difference here. So you'll go ahead and just double click on all of these to fill out the scale, fill out all of this information. And also, when you're done with this, it did say over here, turn off the model space layer when you're ready to plot the T-connector. We don't want to see that magenta rectangle. So we'll come up here and we will turn off the model space. That way, when we come over here, it looks nice and clean. So perfect, you've just made the T-connector.